Hi everyone, so here's my first character that I made in Ritual League. I've been playing a Deadeye based on Impale and physical damage with Rain of Arrow and Barrage. So a pretty basic archer setup that I wanted to play because I haven't really been in PoE for a while now, like half a year or so. Last time I played was in Harvest League and that was also quite short. So I jumped back into it with a normal bow character. And here's what I've done. I've pretty much cleared out most of the Atlas now. I'm closing in on Awakener 8, having all the Conquerors done, all the Watchstones, and I don't really have any troubles farming T60 maps anymore at this point. Total investment for this character so far is maybe around 20x, half of which is the 2 6-links, and then a bunch of items with 20 to 2x value or so. Playing a bow character as a starter is always a bit rough, because you're squishy and you generally rely on good loot compared to spell characters that just get a lot of damage by default, and you can get stuff like Mindful Meta and these kind of things. So it is a bit more difficult to survive and also progress towards the T60 maps, but with a bit of investment it definitely works fine. And I can do all of the endgame content quite easily. Haven't seen Maven yet, but I guess that will also be fine with a little bit of practice, but I don't know yet. I'll probably keep playing this for a little bit longer. I've actually bought another new bow that I want to try out, which gives me quite a nice upgrade, and then I want to try to progress towards Maven and see how that goes. But then again, it's like a really new endgame boss, so who knows how difficult that will be. It mostly comes down to playing the bosses properly. Of course, you can't really face tank stuff with like less than 5k life, but it does work and I don't really get one-shot very much. It does happen that you die to some random stuff or you get like comboed, but if you're careful and you use the defenses properly, I can run for hours without any deaths in T16 maps. So the basic setup looks like this. We have Val, Rain of Arrows here. We have a lot of physical damage scaling and Impale scaling. So here we have Vicious Projectiles, Impale, and then we have the 3 reds, Maim, damage on full life, and Brutality. All these scale physical damage or Impale, and I have exactly the same links in my Barrage here with Vicious Projectiles, Impale, Maim, damage on full life, and Brutality as well. These are the 2 main skills. So Rain of Arrows looks like this. It's very nice AoE clear, especially with all this Impale stuff. I have these gloves here, great old ones tentacles, that I found while making the build. I didn't really have much of a plan when I started out. I just wanted to play like a physical archer. And I found these gloves here and they are really nice for AoE clear. They basically give you a little bit like these explodey chests effects or like an impulsor with basically scaling with your own damage instead of the enemy's life. But that actually works really well. So you shoot into a pack, everything explodes, and maybe the yellow survives with like a little bit of HP, you shoot again, that one's gone too. So this is actually extremely nice. I have 97% chance to impale. It also gives me a 20% chance to impale that I need to kind of like finish scaling to close to 100%, and it has a bit of extra life. I bought a corrupted version here that was quite cheap, about like 30C or so. Otherwise these gloves are like 1C, so very easy to get. The rest of the impale chance comes from the tree. We have the swift skewering allocated on my amulet here. So this is this node here, which gives you 50% chance to impale, and we also have the dread banner that gives me the remaining extra, I think 22% chance to impale, and that puts me at 97% together with the impale support gems. The rest of the build is pretty much only support stuff. So we have something like here with dash with second wind, so you can dash twice for mobility. We have a frost bomb that I'd like to use sometimes on these Maven encounters because Maven keeps healing bosses, so I just popped this in. I didn't really have much of a use here. I did start out with skitter bots, so this is why I had the blue gem, and later on I replaced the skitter bots because I didn't really like them much, and I took the aspect of the cat actually. I was considering aspect of the crab too for the 20% physical damage reduction. That would make it very tanky, and both of these crafts are quite cheap, so I can go with either of them. The other auras we have are Herald of Purity for a bit of extra DPS. Not really strong, but it adds like 10% or so, so not bad. And we have Flesh and Stone, which is also not really crazy. So theoretically you can actually go with a lot less mana reserved and maybe even take something like a Cloak of Defiance to have Mind over Matter. And it could be even more tanky if you, for example, play this on hardcore, and you'll probably never die really if you have enough recovery, which in my case comes from the Poacher's Mark. So previously I was running Poacher's Mark and doing manual casts, and later on I crafted this ring here in Harvest Crafting. So this is pretty neat, because I get frenzy charges, I get these automatic Poacher's Mark applications whenever I have a tough fight. And with Poacher's Mark, it gives you a lot of life per hit and mana per hit, and you essentially heal to full in a split second or so, because you have so many projectiles with the rain of arrows hitting multiple times. I also have extra life gain for each enemy on attacks. That one is a lucky roll, but not really required. It does help a bit of a sustain. When you get hit, you just instantly heal to full. But even with the Poacher's Mark alone on boss fights, you barrage them and you go back to full life in like a second or so. My bow looks like this. This is like 412 physical DPS or so. And it did have some other rolls before. So I house crafted this last night with keep all prefixes and reroll the suffixes, which actually downgraded a little bit. Well, to some degree. For me, this bleed stuff is not really useful. Before that, I had at least attack speed, which I had crafted. So it was like a slight downgrade, but nothing really bad. I do have a new bow that I bought, which I haven't linked yet, unfortunately. But it looks like this. This one is much better. It gives me actually like a 25% DPS upgrade. So this is pretty neat. And this one was 6x. The other bow I bought the second day of the league or so for 3x. And it has served me pretty well though. My other 6 thing here is the Law Weave. I just like Law Weave, I like the resistances, it gives me extra defenses, and I don't really have to stack so much life. So as long as you don't get one shot from physical attacks, you are generally fine. And it has a bit of everything, it has a bit of stats, a bit of crit, a bit of physical damage. So I mostly went for the 78 resist here, high life roll and a high physical roll, and the crit is a bit low, but it doesn't matter too much in my case. All the other gear is nothing really crazy, mostly yellow stuff with lots of life and resist and maybe a bit of crit or so. So we have this helm, for example, that I bought for, I don't know, 30C or something. We have an amulet here, also nothing too crazy, but it works. And I decided to allocate the swift skirring here. Previously, I was actually pathing down there. So I was on the tree here and going all the way there just for this. And I decided to just cut all this and improve my DPS a lot by just allocating it. If you get some other sources of Impale chance, then you can also skip this and get something else here. But I felt for me this was the best way to do it. Here's my quiver, also nothing crazy. This can definitely be improved, and it doesn't even have that much, not even any resist or anything. So I was thinking about actually going for Rislafa's Coil. This might be another upgrade to go for. This would give me around 20% more DPS or so, but we lose the resists and the Abyssal Socket here, but realistically still like a 15% or so upgrade. So maybe go for that and then have like some resist here or some other slots, and that could be pretty nice. Here's my boots. I found them myself. I didn't enchant them with a proper enchant yet. This is absolutely useless what I have here, but it has lots of resists and some life, so pretty neat. Here's my other ring with also lots of life, some resist, and the cat craft. My flasks are Diamond Flask, Dying Sun. Previously I had a Jade Flask here, and later on I replaced it for more DPS. So when I activate the Diamond and the Dying Sun, I get roughly around 20 to 25% DPS each. So I can go much higher when I have these offensive flasks. We have a Basalt here for some physical damage reduction, and the Quicksilver with the increased movement speed. And here's a bubbling Eternal Life Flask with the bleed immunity. So this is pretty neat. For budget, you know, all these flasks are really cheap besides the Dying Sun. So I'll just go with the Jade Flask. That also gives you a lot of defense, which helps out early on. So here's my tree. When I leveled, I was actually starting out in the projectile damage path here on top, because this gives you a lot of damage for the campaign. This is really nice. And in Act 2, you get the Rain of Arrows and the Barrage. So as soon as I went there, I swapped to those skills. And before that, I was just running with like Split Arrow and just fighting my way through Act 1. Nothing really too crazy. And then in Act 2, just swap to the right skills. And then I path around here to all these like starter ranger nodes here. We can take Finesse, we can take Aspect of the Links. And I took Quickstep here. That already sped up my campaign a lot, because I have lots of movement speed here everywhere. The Flask nodes are pretty nice, so definitely useful for the campaign as well, because you don't really get so many Flask charges. And with this you have a lot of Quicksilver effects, and you can level quite easily. And then we basically went over here through Herbalism and took this whole bow wheel, King of the Hill and Master Fletcher. Then I already started scaling crit. So when I was like level 40 or so, I went down here to lethality. And then I went over here to the duelist area with the Avatar of the Hunt and the bravery and these kind of things here. At the start I skipped all the jewels. In the campaign and early on you don't really get good enough jewels to really make that worth taking, even with only 2-point jewels, so I skipped all of those. Later on I just went up here to the shadow area. This is like the stuff that I filled out the last. And before I had a Lion Eyes Fall, which I added quite late actually, I basically had stuff like Accuracy and Heartseeker. You can actually take Survivalist too if you need to resist. So there's a bunch of stuff to take here all over the tree that is pretty useful. Basically we're just scaling a lot of attack speed, a lot of crit, a lot of bow damage and physical damage. And these are the most important nodes here. And of course you need the swift scoring because of the Impale scaling. This is like one of the big nodes to take here, even though it's quite costly with a lot of pathing down here. I would definitely recommend it because you need the extra Impale chance, and it also has extra Impale effect and these kind of things. So all that is pretty neat. I decided to skip the Cyan life area here, which I usually take when I have a bow character because it's quite hard to get a lot of life here. But I'm doing fine. Later on I actually went for Wind Dancer. This one has 20% less damage taken if you haven't been hit recently, and if you are running around dodging a lot, and especially with Jade Flask you have lots of evasion. This should not really be such a big deal as long as you kill stuff quickly, and especially on boss fights it makes it very safe. You can essentially count this as 1000 extra life, so that node alone is really nice. And then again there's also acrobatics and phase acrobatics, so here we have 40% chance to dodge and 30% spell dodge. This also adds a nice layer of defense. And with this and Steel Skin, which I use manually, I can survive most attacks quite easily, and I can run maps even on T16, even really juiced up maps without any trouble now. Here's also the passive tree and path of building. So you've just seen this here, and it was a little bit different before. So here's my default tree that I used without the Lion Eyes Fall. So it was a bit different. I was experimenting with a brutal restraint here, but it just added like some minor things. Nothing really crazy. And yeah, basically we had stuff like the Druidic Rite here that was useful, some of the mana nodes, and here, as I mentioned, Heartseeker, Accuracy, which I removed later on to get the jewel in here. And also here's this one mana leech node. So if you look at our DPS here, we see I have like around 1.5 million. I always try to shoot for like around 2 million with my builds. So this is actually pretty nice, and I can still improve this. I have only 96% hit chance right now. I'll try to get a bit of accuracy somewhere. That alone can give me like plus 5-6% DPS. These numbers are on the boss actually, and I only have like the stuff checked that I have anyway, like the Tailwind, the Maimed, and the Blind. This is without any flasks. And when we put the flasks here, we go up to almost 2.5 million. And that is already pretty neat. So you can basically delete most of the bosses in maps quite easily in a matter of seconds. And even the Conquerors on like Awakener 8, they die in maybe less than a minute or so if you're playing well. So this is totally fine in my opinion. The only fight so far that has given me some trouble is Cyrus, but it's mostly because I don't really have much experience with Cyrus. One neat thing that I added here is actually the Ensnaring Arrow Totem. So I have this for boss fights and also sometimes on rituals. I just pop them, and I have this linked with Culling Strike, Arrow Nova, and the Ballista Totem. And they shoot for me and they cull everything, and they also ensnare everything, and that gives me extra projectile damage against these targets. So I just pop them here, spam up flask, and then barrage the enemy down. This is pretty nice, and as soon as they hit 10% HP they will die anyway. This is pretty neat. Here's my Ascendancy. This is quite debatable, but I went with the Far Shot, I went with Endless Munitions, Gathering Winds, and Focal Point. So you can actually choose a lot of things here. Deadeye is pretty neat now. I was experimenting with Wind Ward at the start because of the less damage taken. I figured this was pretty nice, and for hardcore I would definitely recommend this one. Probably removing Endless Munitions here, because yeah, this is just a lot of damage reduction, especially with some dodge, especially with some evasion. For boss fights especially, you can be very tanky with this, and you have to count this as like another 1k or 1.5k life or so in that case. So very, very nice. But yeah, later on I went with Focal Point because I have this Poacher's Mark on Hit Ring, and this constantly applies it in the map, and it has 25% less damage taken from other enemies near your marked enemy. And then you have this increased effect of the marks, which doesn't really do that much, but it adds a bit of DPS because the Poacher's Mark also reduces physical damage reduction from the enemies. Far shot, obviously, I wanted to go for a Deadeye with like a ranged focus. Usually there was always point blank and you had to go in a close range, and I specifically made the Deadeye for far shot. So this was non-debatable, and we have endless munitions here. I think later on, especially when you have better items, when you have like a bow with an extra projectile or two, or you have a quiver with an extra projectile, you could just drop this here if you like, and you could go with Occupying Force, or you could even do this anyway and just pop in a Mirage Archer into your Barrage here, and maybe even have a second Barrage with a ranged attack totem, and you could basically just do totems and Mirage Archers on these really hard boss fights like Cyrus, and basically just dance around and they will kill him quite fast. This should make bossing super easy, especially if you also add Wind Ward to this. So when you're doing a lot of bossing, just go for Occupying a Force, take Wind Ward, remove the endless munitions and remove the focal point, and that should be very easy and very nice. But in my case, I really liked doing like the manual damage, so I wanted to like, you know, fight bosses myself, not just run around. I wanted to shoot myself, so I went with this selection of passives here, and that was pretty nice. My Pantheon looks like this, so I have Soul of Inaris here, but you can also go with Soul of the Brian King, because then you can avoid getting comboed to death in stuns, but this is not really such an issue. But at this point I don't really die much anymore and I don't get stunned at all. So I take this here, and we also have Soul of Garakan, extra evade chance and extra move speed. That was pretty neat. If you're on labs or something, Soul of Lava is always nice for the flask charges. You can also change this around a little bit depending on your likes, but this is what I chose here. Yeah, so looking at my items here, this is nothing really crazy. Most of the cost actually comes from the 6 links, because each 6 link is like 5 or 6x or so. But if you go just with like a 5 link and you have like, you know, like maybe a 50 DPS less bow, then yeah, you can basically get most of the stuff in like less than 3 exals probably. So you can just buy, you know, like your typical like 10 to 30 C items or so, and you know, like a little bit less life, maybe a little bit less resist on every piece. You don't have to go for the RoA, for example. You can easily progress your way through, you know, white, yellow, even into the red maps. And then I just, you know, started decking out my character with more juice later on with the 6 links. And I have the double corruption here from a temple. Nothing really crazy, but it helps a bit. And yeah, this all makes stuff a bit more easy. But I think if you have like at least 4k life or so, and you have this Wind Dancer, and you have maybe even the Wind Ward, then you will be quite tanky. And this alone will already carry you with, you know, a bit of damage. With those Impale explosions here from Great Old One's tentacles, they are really nice for clearing up AoE. And as I mentioned, if you want to make bossing easier, you can just swap around the Ascendancy. One last thing, I have a weapon swap with Sinvicta's Metal, which gives you Rampage. I don't really use that very much for the Rampage, but sometimes it activates when you have good timing. I mostly have this for the Vigilant Strike. So I have a Fortify setup here with faster attacks, with Fortify support. And if I hit something, I get like 13 seconds Fortify. This is pretty neat, because you can just use this whenever you know you have like a tough fight ahead of you. For example, you see the Metamorph around the corner, or you're building a Metamorph, or you have a ritual. I just, you know, spawn the first enemy on a ritual and then pop my Fortify, and I can very safely do the fight, even getting hit, even standing still, and I will most likely not die at all, even from the super juicy attacks. Or when you have like a Legion encounter as well, this can be quite nice in these kind of situations. I don't activate this all the time. It's maybe like once a map or so, or maybe like 2 or 3 times a map because of the rituals, but it is definitely quite nice to just weapon swap, right click something, and then swap back. Just make sure that you have like a little bit of a delay before you swap, because sometimes when you try to do it too fast, you might not swap, and then you might be stuck with your melee weapon in hand and you might die because of this. So just make sure you have the right timing, and maybe wait like a split second longer to do the swap here. Yeah, so that's about it for my character. There's definitely lots of room for improvement if you want to invest a lot of exalts. So for example, you can get a helm with a barrage enchant, or also a dash enchant is really nice. That gives you increased dash distance. That can be really nice. But I like this helm, it has Chaos Rest too, so that's neat. And you can get like an extra arrow here, you can get an extra arrow on your bow, or just a better bow in general. And you can maybe get like a curse on hit, a glove here with like an extra curse amulet. So there's definitely some really expensive stuff you can go for. or for example also the Tailwind plus elusive boots, or just elusive boots maybe even. That will also help you out a lot already with extra speed and extra dodge. As I mentioned, also Reslafa's Coil might be something to go for, and otherwise, yeah, this can be very endgame viable with, you know, 15x, 10x, even 20x, depending on what you go for exactly. So that's it for my character. So if you have any questions on how to build it, or how to make an archer work and survive in endgame, I'll be streaming this for a while longer before I start my next second character, but you can always just stop by and ask me. So hope you liked this video, and see you guys next time.